About a month ago, we talked a little about lodging in crops and just how important it is to have the right fertility out there, potassium, manganese, and copper. Today, we want to focus a little bit more on picking which fields you're going to harvest first this fall and just evaluating some other things that you might see in the crop, including some diseases that could impact lodging here this fall.
You know, we were going to talk about this today on the show, and Brian said, hey, Darren, here's your shot to talk about some of these diseases that you've been harping on all summer. One of those has been physoderma. We've seen more physoderma across the country this year than ever before, and it's really surprising to me. I thought the way the weather turned out, it might not be as bad, but wow, we're seeing it. And when you've got physoderma, first of all, you need to be able to identify it. So watch for those purple spots on the leaves or down the stalk. And then the next thing to watch out for is node breakage. So this corn can actually snap right at those nodes. And if that happens, it's on the ground and you can't harvest it. So Brian mentioned harvestable grain. Well, if you've got physoderma out in the field, that field needs to move to the top of your harvest order, and you need to take it a little bit wetter. So you need to be prepared for that. If you don't have a dryer on your farm, start looking for what's an outlet where I could take some 24% moisture corn, so I make sure I get it in the combine instead of on the ground.
So the whole point is, before harvest, we want you walking out in your fields. And I realize it's very common, once that corn gets above waist high, you may not be spending a lot of time in the field anymore. But we would just highly encourage you, evaluate your fields for which ones should get harvested first, not with moisture, but with which ones are most at risk. Because you might think, oh, I don't know, everything is looking fine so far. But you and I both know if a big wind comes along tomorrow night, what's going to happen? It's going to tip over, and the fields that are most at risk, those are the ones you want to get out hopefully before that wind comes.
When you look at corn stalks, if they look nice and yellow on the outside all the way up and down, or they're still green, even better yet, awesome. You can wait with that field, you can let it dry down in the field a little bit more, that's great. But when you see black up the side of that stalk, you need to be really concerned. And this is where we're talking about anthracnose. Some hybrids have less tolerance to anthracnose than others. And if you find that you've got one of those hybrids out in your field and you're seeing black up the outside of the stem, plan to harvest that field early and think about what we're going to do with that residue. Because if you leave that residue out in the field, all these diseases that we're talking about, many of them, I shouldn't say all, but many of them are going to survive in that residue. And the next time you've got corn or a susceptible crop out there, it's going to splash up onto your new stalks and leaves and create more disease problems again. So if you've got anthracnose out there, harvest early, pick some different hybrids going forward, and then do something in your residue management program to get that residue broken down and gone so you don't have the problem going forward.
My favorite thing I hear each fall is when Darren comes in after looking at fields and he goes, Brian, the corn's starting to break down. We better go harvest. Look, every fall the corn is going to break down. That's literally what it does. It cannibalizes itself. So it does break down the roots, the stalk, the leaves, everything, and it feeds that ear. So all we're trying to do today is help you figure out, well, which ones are breaking down the most? Which ones are putting you most at risk? And what I encourage you to do is walk in those fields and shake the stalks a little bit. See if the ears drop off. If the ears are dropping off with barely touching them, that means you need to be out there quick. If the stalk is breaking by barely touching it, you need to be out there quick. And yes, I realize you don't want to harvest 24% moisture. You'd rather harvest 19 or 18% moisture, but that's just the way it goes. I'd way rather spend some drying money than see my corn end up on the ground.
Well, one thing I would like to see completely broken down and dead on the ground is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this weed coming up next.